I am not teaching, I am publicly learning. But hi and welcome to Learning for the Life in the UK test part 158. Problems in the economy in the 1970s. And while doing leg injury prevention training, and if you participate in the leg injury prevention training, that is at your own risk. So I was just thinking about whether I would just say something to some great British inventions of the 20th century, which were the previous 7 parts or so, that we went more or less for the inventions and not for the people who invented them, because it's almost always the invention printed more thick and not the name of the people. The exception is the one I'm pointing to. Except the exception is Jodrell. The radio telescope Sir Bernard Lovell, built at Jodrell in Cheshire, was for many years the biggest in the world and continues to operate today. It was just built at Jodrell. Maybe that's the place, or it's actually the bank in Cheshire. I don't think we should remember Jodrell. So, and when I saw that he's written something, you should be able to identify all 15 British inventions on this and the previous page, and then they were invented. You also need to be able to identify the inventors. It's just to give us something to do. Seriously. These are just 15 numbers. It's not really important for the life if the DNA structure was 1953 or 1954 or in the 50s, or was it 1961 or 62. It's not important if it was 1953 or 63 or 43. It's not important. It's absolutely not important. And technically, it's honoring, but it's not really important who invented them. They are important for Britain today and the whole world. It's just we had to look for something which the people can spend some hours on to learn. They don't have to understand a lot or anything. It's just to look and we spend a few hours with this. We will do it. Problems in the economy in the 1970s. In the late 1970s, the post-war economic boom came to an end, so we have something here written which fits in the time frame. The number of people migrating from the West Indies, India, Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh fell in the late 1960s because the government passed new laws to restrict immigration to Britain. Immigrants were required to have a strong connection to Britain through birth or ancestry. Okay, more did we not have. Okay, what is it in? In the late 1970s, the post-war economic boom came to an end. So there was, after the war in the second half of the 1940s, 1950s and 1960s, there was a boom in the economy. We had here the swinging 60s, people were better off and were able to buy cars and consumer goods. Now in the late 1970s, that came to an end. Prices of goods and raw materials began to rise sharply, and the exchange rate between the pound and other currencies was unstable. So sharply, very suddenly, the prices for things to buy, for goods, and also for the raw materials, I think we're speaking now of economy, so if the economy wants to buy steel or something, that they had risen sharply, the prices of them, and the exchange rate between the pounds and other currencies was unstable. So the pound was a pretty, but I don't know exactly, the pound was, as far as I know, a pretty stable and pretty mighty currency. And now it became unstable to other currencies. For example, for the US dollar, the euro wasn't there yet. Europe had different currencies. So let's say the US dollar, I think that was there. And it was unstable, so you could not just plan, I don't know, £1 is, I don't know the numbers of the 70s. You could not just say it's A to B. One is wet is it's A to A, as A to B. But tomorrow it could be way more, or next month, so that makes it harder for firms to plan. But it's more important. That is a sign, as I think, as they expressing here, that the economy is not so stable. So the pound to other currencies was unstable, the exchange rate. This caused problems with the balance of pay. Yes, writing what's going on. This caused problems with the balance of payments. Imports of goods were valued at more than the price paid for exports. Are they trying to explain a more or less complex, I think it's one of a simple one, but more or less complex economic structure in one sentence, which we should understand with just one sentence and a few words, but we should spend a couple of hours on learning 15 inventions, the inventors, and the year in which they were invented. This caused problems with the balance of payments. What is the balance of payments? A payment is what you buy, but we're talking not about consumers. They are talking about importing of goods. And that the value of goods was more than the price paid for the export. Now we're not talking about the same stuff. Now goods were imported, but why not raw materials, then make goods out of it and then export raw materials? So we're talking maybe about completely different stuffs, and the things exported are not used to make something out of it or export it. We're talking maybe completely just about goods, but goods are not the raw material. So what could Britain import at goods? At the same time, Britain is exporting things, and that happens at a higher price. The problem is now that the things imported were measured at a higher value. That means they are paying too much for what they're importing, more than they are worth, and the things which they are paying out, which they are exporting, which they are selling, has too little price. The balance of payment did not work. This caused problems. But if the exchange rate between the pound and other currencies was unstable, that technically means it was going up and down. That means that sometimes it was bad, and sometimes it was good, and sometimes people were bought cheaper when they were worth, and things were sold more expensive when they were worth. This caused problems with the balance of payments. We are having a little bit, at least, explained about the impacts. Imports of goods were valued at more than the price paid for exports. Maybe because the pound was unstable, people were giving more on top of it because they said we don't know how much it's worth next week. So we're saying we're giving 10% more. Because maybe next week the pound is 10% low. That is a complex thing, and that to understand could be in the world every day important. For tomorrow, if there's something in the economics where we understand what currency changes and an unstable currency exchange rate has for meaning for the everyday problems, prices of goods and raw material. The post-economic boom. I don't think it is important for us to know if a DNA molecule was discovered in 1953 or 1956. But we should know what it means if inflation goes up or down, or if it goes up and down, or whatever. That is something we should know tomorrow. We will do both. We can't do the thing which is important because we're not explaining it, so we're doing the thing we can. And we're starting with the first one, and then we're doing just leg injury prevention training and nothing else. The television. So we should remember now when the television war had the first broadcast. That was in 1936 by the BBC, and we should remember, first I want to look what also is mentioned on that page. Now they concord, which is the same. And nothing else technically. Maybe they're listing here new styles of architecture, including high-rise buildings, and the use of concrete and steel became common. This is not an invention. Nothing of that, except for concord. So is anything mentioned here? I don't have time to look actually for it though. And I don't mean music. Music It's not really invented, it is created. It has something to do with it, but I don't think they mean it. So the television was developed. Now it would be helpful if we would also print the name of the inventor, or the inventors. Sometimes we got to learn two names. And the year, a bit broader, so it's visible to see. Now here are lots of numbers. Now the invention of a television was in the 1920s, but it's always the funny thing with inventions. But it's not so hard to say when it exactly happened. A television is a complex apparatus. It's not invented overnight. There are multiple things which had to be invented day after day after day, over a long time. It takes maybe the whole 1920s. The first radio television was in 1936. The first broadcast was in 1936. Is that important for us? If it was developed in the 1920s, the first broadcast from London to Glasgow in 1932, but the first broadcast in 1936, it is of course important for the history, if we want to know when was everything, of course. But my problem is I can't even find out which number we now want. It was developed in the 1920s. In 1932, he made the first television broadcast. It doesn't even say us if someone else maybe did it in 31 earlier than he. He has just written he made it. So we're precise with the dates. We want that we know precise 1932. But they are not precise with words. So 1932, in the 1920s and 1932, he, and we are talking about John Logie Baird. I hope it will help us tomorrow that we know John Logie Baird. Now a shortened leg injury prevention training. This is what we maybe need tomorrow, so that we don't injure our legs. If you participate in it, that is at your own risk. We will continue on in the next part with new things, when we go every time through the people. For example, John Logie Baird, who developed in the 1920s the television, and in 1932, he made the first broadcast from London to Glasgow. So, we're breathing in and going, and we're breathing out. And breathing in. And out. And again in. And out. Again in. And out. And again in. And out. It would be better for us if we knew what these inventions actually are doing. So the whole thing which I spent the last 7 parts talking about, what we are doing, if we would learn that would actually be useful. But just learn names and dates and a thing. We will forget all this in a few weeks. You can't just remember dates and names and things without knowing what it's talked about, without a story. You will just forget it in a few days. We're lifting one leg up. We're having a right angle with the leg, a flexed foot, even and hips were taller than the back. Now we're pressing from the inside against the knee. Even and hips taller than the back, and we're pressing from the inside against the knee. And we're changing to the other side. The leg up, right angle with the leg, flexed foot, even and hips taller than the back, and we're pressing from the inside. And the leg down. And the last exercise we don't have so much time. Right angle with the leg, flexed foot, even and hips taller than the back, and now we're pressing from the outside against the knee. With moderate force, you don't have to overdo it, and not properly warmed up. And we bring the leg to the outside, the heavy swing down. And we're bringing the leg again back in. And we're bringing the leg to the outside. And again. On the outside, the leg up, right angle with the leg, flex foot, even and hips taller than the leg, and the pressing from the outside against the knee. And we bring the leg again back in. And the same time to the outside. And again back in. And now just a closing exercise, we're breathing in. Out. Again in. now we're closing the legs, and out, and we're done with a very short leg intervention training. Television was developed in the 1920s by John Logan Baird, and in the 1920s, and the first broadcast was done from London to Glasgow in 1932. It's just easier to remember if we make a story of London and Glasgow to it. So I thank you very much, and until the next time.